trying to show us this morning. In Jesus' name, amen. So this is what would Jesus do? More like what did Jesus do? What did he do? Because we got the record of the 4 gospel accounts that tell us what Jesus did from the perspective of 4 different authors. Today we're looking at the book of John. And the question is, why do you do what you do? Here's the deal. If you do something, that's good. If you do something noble, that's great. As far as God's concerned, why'd you do it? People notice what you did, but God knows why you did what you did. And there are an awful lot of things done that aren't done with the right motivation. And, you know, I don't know how I got this way. Maybe I've always been like this, cynical. Had a friend, most of you know him, who always said, it's not the money, it's the money. In other words, what it boiled down to is everything that's done, all the actions taken is really about the money. Now, that's not always true. Sometimes people do things because they want a legacy. Sometimes they want, they just want to be famous in history. But usually it's about the money. And by the way, he proved it in every way in his life. Whenever I see a commercial, you see the commercials, the word "it's too good to be true." The reason it seems to be too good to be true is because it's too good to be true. So I have a habit. I went back to Georgia State University, got a master's degree in marketing. And I was already cynical about advertising, but when I studied techniques and everything, I'm going, whoa, there's a lot more deceit in advertising than even I realized. So when I listen to any kind of commercial on TV or radio, there's a catch in there. If it sounds really, really appealing, there's a catch. And if you're not paying attention, the same person that said it's not the money, it's the money, he was a sucker for advertising. I mean, he had all of the as seen on TV stuff at his house. Most of it not even opened. I mean, he just gets sucked in on flashy commercials. And Paul said in 1 Corinthians 2:4-5, he said, my speech and my preaching was not with enticing words of man's wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power, that your faith should not stand in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. Because men will deceive you. How many times in my lifetime, and you probably too, have you quoted something that you heard from somebody that you believed to be absolutely true, and then found out it wasn't even true? After you'd said it many, many times over many, many years, and found out that the person that told you that just hadn't even really researched it. Well, it's happened to me. And there's a lot of misinformation in the world, which we're hearing about that right now. And so there's a certain party that would like to regulate misinformation. And I don't like misinformation, but it seemed like they're doing the misinformation. So who's going to regulate that? Who's going to watch over? Who's going to make sure? Well, speech is generally persuasive, not necessarily accurate. and the motivation of the people with the speech ought to be noble, ought to be correct, but you know, I know, it's not many times noble or correct. Well, here's such an occasion where motivation was really, really bad. And so let's begin reading in John chapter 5, verse 1. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. Now, if you've been to Israel, you've seen that. And that is, well, there are a lot of things you don't know if they're the actual place. There's some things you can be sure of when you're on the Sea of Galilee. That's the same Sea of Galilee. Well, and we're quite certain that that's the actual pool of Bethesda. It was in better shape back then. All right? A few too many baths in there, but that's the pool of Bethesda. And that's where this incident takes place, right there in Jerusalem at the pool of Bethesda. Now, John gives a timeline based on the Passover festival. So the only one of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the only one that gives you a timeline is John. And so we know the ministry of Jesus, the earthly ministry, was 3.5 years because it started with the Passover. Before the Passover, at the wedding of Cana, the baptism of Jesus, the induction into the ministry, we know that took place prior to the first Passover. Then we have the Passover of chapter 4, chapter 5, or chapter 5, chapter 6, and the Passover of the crucifixion. And by the way, the last half of the book of John takes place on the eve of the crucifixion. So a lot of people don't realize that. You get down into John chapter 13, and there we are on the eve of the crucifixion, and there are 21 chapters in the book of John. So 9 more chapters, all on the eve of the crucifixion. And so John gives a timeline based on the Passover festivals. Only John records this incident in keeping with John 20:31, where he said, "These are written that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you might believe in his name." This may be a regular weekly Sabbath, or it could be the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. We're not sure which it is, but it was, either way, it was the Sabbath where it's an absolute no work day. Now, I wear this out, but Sunday's not the Sabbath, never will be the Sabbath. Sabbath has always been Shabbat, the 7th day, and the 7th day was and is for the Jews an absolute no work day. You can't read the Pentateuch, can't read the Old Testament without recognizing that Shabbat is a no work day. So think about that with regard to the people that treat Sunday like a Sabbath day. They're not even coming close to keeping it like it's supposed to be kept. Sunday is not Shabbat. But Shabbat was an absolute no work day, and every day of the week, this pool of Bethesda was surrounded by a great multitude of people that were wanting to get healing. Now, by the way, if you want to read more about it, BibleTract.org is my commentary. And got a lot written on this incident on BibleTract, so you can go there and find that. Now, here's a puzzling verse, very puzzling verse. "For an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was made well of whatever disease he had." Now, incidentally, some of the newer translations don't have that verse in there. It is kind of a puzzling verse, isn't it? I mean, I think of what I'd do. I'd go to Walmart, get me a float, and I'd just lay in the water. I'd just be there all the time. But there they are on the edge of the pool, waiting for the water to be troubled by the angel. First one in gets healed, and so here's this crippled man. I mean, way crippled by the pool. And it says a certain man that was there who had an infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been in that condition for a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be..." I don't know, I just get... I don't know why that's funny to me. Do you want to be made well? Or do you just want to lie there? You know, what do you want to do? Now, not sure who that comment was meant for, but we'll see there's a lesson in it in just a few moments. Why the question? Well, let's look further and see. If Jesus came to heal all the sick, he failed. Only a few of the sick were healed. His ministry was John 20:31, as I quoted a few moments ago. These are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, that believing you may have life in his name. So the sick man answered and said, "Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I'm coming, another steps down before me." So this is an incapable, deserted man. I mean, it's tough. Isn't it interesting that only this first that got in would be healed? But that's what John reports. So what's this man thinking? You gonna stand there and kick me in with the water trouble? I mean, how are we gonna do this? Don't know what the man's thinking, but he wants to be healed. And Jesus said to him, "Arise, take up your bed," which was krabatos, a mat. You know, when you were kids, your mom made you a pallet, in there. Well, that's what this is. It's a pallet. "Rise up, take up your bed, and walk." And immediately the man was made well, took his bed, and walked. Yeah, but it was the Sabbath day. I mean, just a verbal command is all that Jesus did. Interestingly enough, Jesus is not accused here of healing on the Sabbath day. Now, that happened before. But he just tells the guy to get up. Just a verbal command. Off of his pallet, it's krabatos. But it's the Sabbath day. The Jews, therefore, said to him, "It is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your bed." Now, the Pharisees were the religion police. They were standing ready, whatever it took, to find fault with whatever you did. They looked for things. You know, like when I was in the Marine Corps, we'd have inspection a couple, 3 times a week. And the drill instructor would take a quarter and flip it onto your bed, and if it didn't bounce, you got punished, and you had to remake your rack. Not bed, but your rack. They had to bounce off. Now, in what universe is it important that your quarter bounce off your rack? Marine Corps. That's the universe. Well, he seemed to take great pleasure. He seemed to be disappointed if he didn't find 1 or 2 or 3 racks that the quarter just flopped. I mean, that's what he lived for. He was looking for mistakes. Clean our rifles. We'd have to go dump them in the dirt, throw sand on top of them, bury them, pull them out, and clean them, and then get them inspected. We did that once, 2, 3 times a week. And then we had to be able to do it in a record amount of time. And you'd take your rifle, and you knew it was clean. You showed it to the guy next to you. He looked it over. You looked it over. We both looked it over. And I mean, just a little bit of anything. And he'd make you throw it in the dirt again and start over. I mean, he was not a likable fellow. And, well, he told us at the beginning, I don't want to be your friend, and he wasn't. Got his wish on that. Well, these Pharisees, they took pride in memorizing the law. Now, it wasn't just the law. It was what's called, it's written down today. It wasn't written down then. It was the Mishnah, which was Genesis through Deuteronomy, plus volumes and volumes and volumes, when they finally got written down, of oral tradition. You know how sometime they'll determine how to interpret some ruling based on, and they'll go back to like 1800s and pull an obscure law that nobody has enforced in over 100 years and say, this says you can't do that. Well, these guys, it was all oral. They had sages that were the experts. They would say, yeah, no, says you can't really do that. Well, one of the things is you can't be carrying your bed around. That's a weird rule, isn't it? The religion police would watch and make sure that you were complying. Were these guys, these religious police, these Pharisees, were they happy for people? No, they weren't happy for them. They had bad motivation. Absolutely bad motivation. Now, there's some things to understand here. That in the oral tradition, it was against the law to carry anything out of your house. Now, of course, there's the mandate in Exodus 28 through 10 says no work on the Sabbath day. We get over to the book of Jeremiah in chapter 17, and we find here's what the problem was. Jeremiah was talking about how the people had deviated from serving God, and one of the things they did, because they couldn't actually do physical work on the Sabbath, they would save up things that they had built or whatever, or that they wished to take to the marketplace, and they would do that on the Sabbath day. So they would do merchandising on the Sabbath day. So Jeremiah, in chapter 17, he's warning them, no, that's not, you're not observing the Sabbath day. Well, as Jews do, they went overboard with the law, of course. It's just like the no milk and meat products at the same meal on any day of the week, because of the verse that says 3 times in the Old Testament, thou shalt not see the kid in his mother's milk. They have no idea what that means. So what they did is they said, okay, no meat and milk in the same meal. So you can go to McDonald's, but you're not getting a cheeseburger. You can go to Pizza Hut, but you'll get a Pizza Hut either without meat or without cheese, but you're not going to have both. And so what they did, I don't know what it means, so that's what they did. Well, here's what they did on this one. The Jewish fathers, the sages, they were very creative. And this thing of not being able to carry anything out of your house on the Sabbath day, including your krabatos, your bed. Well, that was a pain. And so they invented something strictly out of their saginess. They invented the eruv, which is still used today. This is the one around Manhattan. As a matter of fact, you can't read the top there, but it says there, see the big green check mark? It says the Manhattan eruv is up. Last checked on 10/24/24. And what that is, that's a nylon filament that goes around the utility poles around the whole island of Manhattan. Except for a couple of curious, see the yellows? Not included, don't know why. I think I have a hunch, but we'll go find out exactly why. But that's what's called an eruv, and as long as you are inside the perimeter of the eruv, you are home. Now, is that a loophole or what? And you saw it's 10/24. That should have been Thursday, was it? Okay, every Thursday, a rabbi whose specific job it is to go from pole to pole all around Manhattan and make sure that the filament is not broken anywhere. And then Friday before sundown to get it fixed so that the eruv is intact on the Sabbath day. So if the man had been inside an eruv, but obviously he wasn't, carrying his bed. I mean, that's pretty bad right there, carrying your bed. Carrying your cushion and cloth around that you slept on. Bundled up, carrying it around. I mean, how disgusting. But it was against the law. Now, by the way, I should point out, the eruv is interesting. I could talk about an eruv for quite some time because I read about it every time I see an article. There's a place in New Jersey called Maw, New Jersey. And back in 2017, some people noticed because running up the side of a utility pole will be this white conduit. And the eruv is running through that white conduit. And people began to notice the white conduit running up to the utility poles. So they did some investigation and found out that the Jews had contracted with the utility companies to use the poles to run an eruv around areas in Maw, New Jersey. They had fits in multiples. And they demanded to know what's going on. Well, it's an eruv going around. Now, why would anybody care if the Jewish people are putting an eruv around certain areas of the city? Hold that thought. First time I went to Israel, some of you were with me. My crazy friend Larry Wade had scheduled our trip, and we went through Kiev. Yeah, Kiev, Ukraine, to get to Israel. And Kiev is a big Jewish center. A lot of people there that are Jews. And so we flew to the airport, had a layover, met some Jews. That's where I found out about Rebbe Schneerson, which I show you the picture of. They thought was coming back. This first contact I had with him, the guy gave me a card, kind of evangelizing. Here's the Messiah, he's coming back. Whoa. Then when we got on the plane to go from Kiev to Tel Aviv, there are probably 50, 60 Orthodox Jews who got on with us. And they even asked somebody to get up because they needed those seats for prayer. They absolutely, they'd stand up there and the tefillin. And one guy stood up facing us, and he'd wrap it around his arm. Then he'd decide that wasn't quite right, and he'd unwrap it. He did that 3 times, just right in front of everybody because he wanted to be seen. I mean, that's what they did. I soon found when I got to Israel, to Jerusalem, that these are the modern day Pharisees, these ultra-Orthodox Jews. They are very imposing, and they feel like, well, their own territory, they have an air of superiority, and they want things done in a way that satisfies them. And so they're not particularly good neighbors. Now, we love the Jews. God loves the Jews. We love the Jews. But they're not necessarily fun as neighbors, just saying. And the people in New Jersey, they thought, we don't want these people here, because here's what that means. If they're putting in a roof around, that means we're getting ready to have an onslaught of Jews, Orthodox Jews, come in and buy the houses around us. Our neighbors on all sides are going to be, we don't want them. Well, we have a word for that, which is anti-Semitic. And so the city ended up, they fought this thing for a year and a half. But finally, the Jews prevailed because it was anti-Semitic. And by the way, they may be kind of imposing, but I'd feel very safe if I lived in the middle of a community with Orthodox Jews, because they're peaceable folks. But they didn't want the observation of Judaism right there all around them. And so when they saw the roof coming up, they knew that here come the Jewish people, and they didn't want that. And one of the things about it is a lot of people, they don't understand the difference. When you see the Jews with the hats and the curls, those are Ashkenazi Jews. Those are usually Hasidic and very ultra-Orthodox. The ones with the big round hats, they're Sephardic. They're very observant as well. But in Israel, half of Israel is made up of Jews who aren't even religious. And so this is not something, you'll see a lot of Orthodox Jews, ultra-Orthodox Jews in Israel, but half the population not even observant, but they are bound by the observant Jews. And that's why Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement, which they just had a couple weeks ago, they abandoned the highways because it's just not right to drive your car on Yom Kippur. And the highways fill up with bicyclists. The non-observant Jews, they just have a big day on the highways riding bicycles. It's a sight to behold when you look at the pictures. Now, it may have occurred to you, we got a roofs? Well, yes, we do. You can't see very well, but up in North Druid Hills, see that? See that area? Here it is. Here it is blown up right here. That's in a roof around North Druid Hills. And Druid Hills, and there's a community up there just below Sandy Springs. There's one up there in Dunwoody. And so those are Jewish eruves. They get inspected every Thursday. And you are, as long as you're inside the eruv, you are home. Because if you weren't home, you couldn't even take a baby stroller out and stroll your baby. You couldn't carry anything out of your house because they had completely misconstrued what Jeremiah was writing about and said, carry nothing from your home on the Sabbath day. And so they made this, for every rule, they've got a loop around the rule. And that's what they have, the eruv. So the religious leaders here, they are not in it to meet people's needs. And that's the case. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you've ever used home hospice for an elderly person. I used home hospice for my dad, and I had a bad company. I had to fire them, but then when we got a good company, the reason I fired them was because they didn't come when they said they'd come, and Dad looked forward to the nurse coming 3 times a week, or an aide coming 3 times a week, giving him a bath, and nurse coming once a week, and have instant access to doctors, and they give you a hospital bed if you need one, and it's completely covered by Medicare. And these companies that do this are just in it because they love, well, no, it could be because they got $5,400 a month to make 3 bath visits, 1 nurse visit, 1 month a week, and 1 social worker visit a month, and you get $5,400. Medicare pays it all. And I looked at the company that had let us down so badly, didn't show up a lot of the time. And you know, the days they didn't show up, they still charged for the nurse visit, charged Medicare. Because you know what? We don't care how much Medicare pays for stuff. And they did. There are some people out there with ill intentions doing stuff that home hospice was great when I had a company that worked. Home hospice was great, but after 18 months, they don't get payment anymore, and they aren't nearly as interested in making the visits when they don't get the $5,400 a month. So, all religious leaders are not in the business of meeting people's needs. Does that distress you? It kind of distresses me. I mean, you'd like to think that if you go to a church, you're going to find someone that just loves you for who you are. Has nothing to do with money or prestige or anything, just loves you for who you are. But I'm just afraid that's not really the case. Statistics are made up. 77.7% of all statistics are made up. But I want to say a large portion of people who are in the ministry don't care about the people they minister to. And that's distressing. And that's exactly what these Pharisees were. Only interested in the prestige of being a Pharisee. He answered them, because they asked him, who made you well? Who told you to carry your bed? He said, he who made me well said to me, take up your bed and walk. All right, so now this guy hadn't been able to pick up his bed, walk for 38 years. Had no idea he was doing anything wrong. Technically, he didn't come out of his house. He was laying by the pool. But they had extended that, you can't be carrying your bed. Now, by the way, inside the walls of Jerusalem, the old city, that was considered an eruv. So he must have been pretty strict that day. Don't know what that was. The man with the power to heal me also told me to carry my bed. Well, that sounds definitive to me, but then they ask him, who is that man who said to you, take up your bed and walk? They didn't ask who healed you. They asked who told you to break the law. Who told you to break our Jewish law? That's why Jesus had such creative nicknames for them, like you're of your father the devil, your whited sepulchres, your generation of vipers. And they earned all those names. Here's the deal. All religious leaders aren't in it to meet people's needs. But the one who was healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn a multitude being in that place. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you've been made well. Sin no more." Now, there's a whole message there, obviously. Jesus associated his illness with sin because Jesus reads minds. So don't sin anymore lest a worse thing come upon you. In other words, it was chastisement by Jesus rendering there. So don't know why Jesus didn't identify himself then, but here he says, go and sin no more. It was chastisement. So what's the correlation implied here between sickness and sin? Some sickness is because of sin. It's chastisement. Some is because of trial. And some is colds. They just happen. Everything doesn't have to have a deep spiritual meaning. The man departed, and this is the one that disturbs me about this man. He departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus who made him well. I don't know if he's going to have to appear in religion court or what, and I don't know why he felt compelled to go rat on Jesus, but why did he run back and tell on Jesus? Was it to magnify Jesus? Perhaps. Or was it to release himself from blame? Maybe. Well, it really doesn't matter, because the lesson here is, why do you do what you do? You know, when we give, why do we give? When we see a need, feel compassion, I need to do something, that's the right motivation. When we are looking for recognition, no, not so much good motivation. It's important that we do what we do with sincerity, not like those hypocrites, the Pharisees, who really hated everybody and competed among one another for who could do the keeping of the law the very best. Why do you do what you do? Is it out of sincerity? Let's stand together, please, with our heads bowed and our eyes closed.